You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, brought to you by the 90 Min Football Network. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and on this edition, we're going to be continuing to react to Arsenal's Carabao Cup semi-final exit, but we're going to be focusing more so on the situation at the club in general at the moment, because as I said on last night's post-match reaction show, although I'm upset, disappointed, frustrated at the fact that we failed to qualify for the final of this season's Carabao Cup, I'm more concerned and more worried about the bigger picture. I'm more worried about the fact that we seem to see very little or have seen very little in terms of progress in acquiring some transfer targets. I think that Arteta's squad has been paper thin for quite a while, maybe not always in terms of numbers, but in terms of quality. And now we're trying to reduce those numbers clearly to make way and make space for other players to come in. But we're doing it at a really key point in the season. And we haven't done enough, in my opinion, to make sure that we protect ourselves against the risk of being caught out, against the risk of being left threadbare and thin. And we're seeing that now kind of come to fruition. So I want to talk about transfers. I want to talk about the fitness issues that we've got, the red card issues that constantly seem to haunt us. And normally what I do when I go to a game is I normally come home, have a quick glance at the very short highlight reels that do the rounds, jump on here, give you guys my instant feedback. And then I normally watch the game back the next morning and then try and form some perhaps more informed opinions off of the back of that. Now, this morning, I did get up, I did stick the game on, but I kind of skim watched it because I found it really hard to watch. It was really difficult to watch because of how off the boil Arsenal felt to me. You know, it wasn't a lack of trying. It wasn't I don't think it was the manager having a tactical howler or anything like that. I just felt that we were just not at the races. And there were some decisions that Mikel Arteta made that I thought were questionable. And having watched the game back again and having thought about it a little bit more, I've got some slightly different views and views that maybe I didn't, particularly think of or come up with at the time of recording last night, but some kind of further observations that I want to share with you guys. But first of all, I think we need to address the whole transfer window situation, okay? Because we're in the transfer window. We know there's around about 10 days left of the transfer window, and we know that Arsenal are in desperate need of doing some business. Now, we've put ourselves in a position where we can't get by. It's very unlikely that we're going to be able to get by and achieve all of our objectives and make sure that we maintain a certain level of performance regularly with the group that we have. You know, we knew that the transfer window was going to come around in January. We knew that the African Cup of Nations was going to come around in January. So there's no excuse for not accommodating for the fact that we were going to be without both Thomas Partey and Mohamed El-Neni. We knew that Ainsley Maitland-Niles and a potential exit for him was on the cards from a while back. Mikel Arteta's alluded to that himself. He's spoken about the fact that Maitland-Niles went to him and told him that he'd give it up until December sort of time and then decide based on how it was going, whether he wanted to be at the club or not any longer. So a lot of these problems have been bubbling under the surface for a long time. And that for me makes it inexcusable when you don't deal with them. Now, why have Arsenal failed to deal with them? And I'm not saying this is acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable. I'm incredibly frustrated and disappointed with where we find ourselves now and the fact that we are so short in certain areas. And I'm really pissed off in particular about the things that we've done that haven't helped us in that. You know, picking up COVID cases, injuries, that can sometimes be out of your hands. But leaving the squad short is something very much of our own making. So I want to highlight those things. I want to talk about those things. I know a lot of people say that I'm very pro Mikel Arteta and very pro Edu, and that I would never say a bad word about them because I'm not abusive towards them. Doesn't mean that I don't see things that I disagree with. And I think, as I say, leaving us in this situation is a massive red flag for me. Are we in a place as Arsenal Football Club where Mikel and Edu, obviously, without us knowing, have been told that they need to move players out to be able to create space to bring players in with regards to the budgets, the funds that are available, potentially? You think about the fact that we've allowed Sead Kolasinac to move on, had his contract terminated. He was a big resource drainer, £100,000 a week. We're now talking about the possibility of Bernd Leno leaving the club during this window, which has supposedly prompted the talks for New England Revolution's Matt Turner. Is that another power play from Arsenal to reduce that wage bill significantly in order to accommodate a new signing, a new blockbuster signing? Remember that Bernd Leno is also on a substantial amount of money. We've moved Pablo Mari out on loan to Udinese. I don't know exactly what they would be, if anything, covering in terms of his wages. But you feel like Arsenal are making room. And it's a bit like what we went through at the beginning of Mikel Arteta's tenure. If you remember, the first thing we said was we need a manager to come in and kill and get rid of all the dead wood and move it out. And then we had to wait for that to happen. It wasn't as easy as we'd have hoped. There wasn't as much interest in a lot of those players as we'd have hoped. And we ended up in a situation where we had to plug a few gaps. We brought in a few players who were clearly not part of the long-term plan. What I'm saying is we had to wait until last summer to really go and splash out and recruit players that we felt were representative of the future and the Arsenal that we want to see in the coming years. And I just wonder if that was kind of step A. Step B was bringing in those players, and now we have to revert back to step A before we can move to plan B again with regards to recruiting. Now, although there was some money thrown about in the summer, you got to remember that this club is still owned by KSE, that the operating model, to our knowledge, hasn't changed dramatically. We're not in a place now, just because we spent a bit of money last summer, where we don't have to worry about balancing the books, or we're not going to be concerned by what we're throwing out there in terms of the transfer market. It feels to me very much like this is a bit of a cycle. You get rid, you bring refreshments in. You get rid of players that you don't feel are part of the future, and you replace them with longer term sort of projects in terms of players. And I feel like we're maybe at that point again, and that's why this window's been incredibly frustrating. Look, I stick to what I said at the beginning of the window, and I stick to what I said at the beginning of the season. I felt like the majority of Arsenal's recruitment was done in the summer, and I didn't feel that there was going to be anything major done in January. But as I've said time and time again, I think circumstances and the situations that have developed at Arsenal have put us in a place where we probably do need to recruit, and actually we need to go quite big on this. And we need to go quite big on this because of our striker situation. That's a massive, massive issue. I think last night, as I mentioned on the post-match show, shone the light on what it is that Lacazette doesn't bring to the team. Brings a lot to it, and is a good option off of the bench as an impact player, as someone that you want to keep in and around the squad because of his positive influence on some of those younger players. But he clearly isn't someone that is the full package. And so with Aubameyang being frozen out, that's increased the need for Arsenal to go out and bring in a striker. I mean, the idea of playing for the remainder of the season with Lacazette as your number one striker and Eddie Nketiah playing second fiddle, that scares me, that worries me, that concerns me. And it's a huge reason as to why, if we don't do something this window, we could find ourselves regretting it come the end of the season. Then you look at the midfield situation, and again, we've got serious problems. And although, we had to deal with the AFCON, Thomas Partey returns, and we should have had him available for Sunday. We're now in a position where ill discipline, not just from Thomas Partey, but from Granit Xhaka too, has meant that our first choice midfield is unavailable for what's going to be a key Premier League fixture coming up on Sunday. So it's just like there's been an element of bad luck in there as well. But a lot of these problems are of our own making. And I think where a lot of people have kind of gone, well, it's Arteta and Edu to blame for the fact that the squad is so thin. I think they have a part to play in that, and I think they are as responsible as anybody else. But let's not overlook the fact that Granit Xhaka getting himself sent off has put us in a shit position. Let's not overlook the fact that Thomas Partey made a challenge at 2-0 down yesterday that he didn't need to make, and actually was probably lucky that he didn't get straight red for that. Let's not forget that those players have put us in an even more difficult position by getting suspensions for silly actions. And I think this is the issue, right? I think we're always very quick to throw the blame in one direction or another. And actually, it's a culmination of factors that has put us in this situation that we find ourselves in now. If we move on and talk a little bit about the reports at the moment doing the rounds with regards to Matt Turner. Now, there's been some contradictory information on this floating around on the Twitter sphere this morning. I've seen some suggest that Arsenal have already lodged a bid to the New England Revolution for Matt Turner, 27-year-old goalkeeper, part of the US men's national team setup. And I've got to be honest, I don't know anything about him. I haven't watched him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert in the MLS goalkeeping field. So, if you want to do a little bit of research on that, I will be, as those rumors and links develop over the coming days, and I'll relay that stuff to you guys. But at this moment in time, it just baffles me that the only advanced conversation we're involved in, to our knowledge, is to do with the goalkeeper. And actually, I'd argue that we've got two pretty good goalkeepers at the club. Now, does Bernd Leno want to leave? Have we had a tempting offer for Bernd Leno that has perhaps, I guess, triggered Arsenal into moving into the market to look for a goalkeeper, possibly? But then that kind of feeds in again, doesn't it, with what I was saying a little bit earlier on about the fact that we kind of seem to have forgotten that there is probably still, based on the way we operate as a football club, a need to move players on, a need to get players off the wage bill before we can go big on some of the targets that the fans would like to see us bringing through the door. So, yeah, I mean, has that Leno thing prompted this? If it is true, you probably argue it has. I understand Bernd Leno's situation. I understand his position. He's too good a goalkeeper to be playing second fiddle, but he's not better than Aaron Ramsdale for me. And because of that, Mikel Arteta had a difficult decision to make earlier in the season. He made it. For the most part, Aaron Ramsdale has proven him right in making that decision. But there was always going to come a point, wasn't there, where Bernd Leno was going to push for a move, where somebody was going to look at his situation and feel this is an opportunity for us to capitalize on, and it's an opportunity for us to get in a top goalkeeper who's out of favour elsewhere. So these situations were all... The point I keep going back to is the situation in midfield, the situation up front, and the situation with regards to the goalkeeping position right now are situations that have been on the stove, almost cooking, if you like, for a while. And we finally got to the point where some of those situations are boiling over. And now Arsenal are in a position where they need to deal with them correctly and in the right way. Otherwise, we could end up, looking embarrassed and looking quite silly come the end of the campaign. There's also been some more talk around Dusan Vlahovic and, the rumours and reports with regards to him. What is going on with him? Are Arsenal still trying for him? The last that I've heard is that Arsenal are still trying desperately to bring Dusan Vlahovic in during this window, that Fiorentina have no issue with the amount of money that's being talked about by Arsenal Football Club. I've been told that that no bid has gone in, and that actually there's just some ongoing discussion, although that's not really progressed since the start of the month. What we're also hearing from the Fiorentina general director in an interview that he gave last night is that there is no offer on the table currently from Juventus. And a lot of Arsenal fans had feared that Juventus were going to come and steal in and take the player away, a club that he's rumoured to prefer over a move to Arsenal. But according to the Fiorentina general director, there is no offer there. Also, we're hearing from Fiorentina that they've been in contact with an English club, but that the player and his agent are not responding, that they don't want to talk about the situation at this moment in time, which then feeds into that story and rumor that had been doing the rounds recently with regards to him potentially not wanting to join Arsenal, and that maybe being the sticking point. So, it's I think we're going to look quite stupid, and we're going to have egg on our faces if we try to bring in Dusan Vlahovic from the start of the window right up until the end, and we fail to do so. Not because, we should be able to acquire every single target we move for. As I've said before, I think Arsenal fans have been quite unrealistic in their sort of assessment of Vlahovic's character off the back of these rumours that he doesn't want to join the club. Why would he jump at the opportunity? I know for us, this is a wonderful football club because we remember the history and we feel a connection to that football club. But someone who doesn't have that link will look at Arsenal's current situation and say, not guaranteed Champions League football. I might not even be guaranteed Europa League football at this football club. The biggest possible attraction is that it's the Premier League. Another big attraction is that it's in London. And of course, financially, you'd think that Arsenal would make this deal very much worth Dusan Vlahovic's while. But it's not just about that. It's about what he sees as his next step in his career. And the fact that, Fiorentina are making noises about the agent and the player not being responsive, I think is quite unsurprising. To me, it's not a surprise. But also, I would always say that you need to take what Fiorentina say with a pinch of salt in the public, because they've been very clear and very willing at times to almost throw Dusan Vlahovic under the bus with regards to his future. And at times that's seen the Viola supporters turn on him. It's classic games, mind games, whatever you want to call it. It happens a lot in Italian football, more so than it does here. And this is a classic example of that. So while I would say that there's a good, strong possibility that Vlahovic and his agents are not responding to this talk because they have no interest in signing with Arsenal, there's a good chance that a lot of this is hot air as well. And we have to be careful at times not to kind of get carried away one way or another when that stuff comes around. Let's see what's going on Twitter at the moment, because a few of you are just saying in the chat that Fabrizio Romano has tweeted about the Dusan Vlahovic situation. Let me just share this with you on the screen. It's basically a kind of recap of what I just told you in terms of the noises coming out of Fiorentina. I was obviously paraphrasing, but here is the quotes from Fabrizio Romano. He says, this comes from the Fiorentina CEO Barone. He says, some English clubs asked us for Vlahovic, but there's no agreement. We're here available, which suggests that they're, of course, open to doing a deal. He also goes on to say there are no updates or communications from Vlahovic or his agents. Zero. There are not even contacts with them. It's always the same. So again, Fiorentina taking a swipe at Vlahovic's representation and the player to a degree. And again, this feeds into what I was just saying. There is this kind of sort of bad blood between the Fiorentina ownership and hierarchy and Dusan Vlahovic's representatives, and perhaps a little bit of resentment towards him as well because of the way this is all being handled. So it makes me feel like they could be saying stuff to paint them in a bad picture. They could be saying it because it's true as well, but it feels like there's a willingness from Fiorentina to throw those guys under the bus at any given opportunity. And as I say, as a consequence of that, we should probably kind of take everything that we're hearing right now with a pinch of salt. So we've talked about the goalkeeper link. Matt Turner, 27-year-old New England Revolution goalkeeper, has been linked with a move to Arsenal. And a lot of people are kind of suggesting that that is a consequence of some interest in Bern Leno. One of the clubs that's been mentioned is, of course, Newcastle United, who we know are not short of a few quid. We've talked about the Vlahovic stuff. The midfield is obviously a big issue. And obviously when those suspensions have been served, the suspension to Granit Xhaka, he's got one game remaining. It's the game against Burnley. And then when Thomas Partey returns after he misses Burnley, the midfield situation eases up. Mohamed El Neni will be back by then as well. Of course, Arsenal with just 2 games on the schedule on the calendar right now for the month of February. So although I think that we still need to bring in a midfielder, and this is not something that I've just come up with as a kind of reactionary stance recently. If you go back to the shows that I did during the summer transfer window, I kept saying, yes, we've done some good business. Yes, we've done some promising business, but I did feel that we missed the trick in the middle of the park, and we missed the trick in not bringing someone in. And when you consider that El Neni's future's up in the air, that, that we've allowed Ainsley Maitland-Niles to go actually, beyond Xhaka and Partey. We've got Lokonga there who's young and is developing, but we don't have a great deal of depth there. So I think the midfield situation, although I would have said it's a priority, and I do think it's a priority, I think Arsenal will be reluctant to break the bank and do something they're not completely on board with, because of the fact that we're, a week away from getting those players back. I think they'll feel that they can get by in the interim. Others will disagree, and that's fine as well. But I think, for example, if Arsenal are serious about Artur and they're being asked to commit to an obligation to buy clause, or they're being asked to commit a huge chunk of wages in terms of what they're contributing to that, or they're being asked to contribute a big sort of loan fee, then I think Arsenal will think twice about that. And I can see a situation, even though I disagree with it, I can see a situation whereby Arsenal go, well, we're a week away from getting those players back. Actually, we don't need to bring in a midfielder now. It's not the priority. But my kind of mindset on this has shifted as those players have started to return, as the Thomas Partey's AFCON campaign come to an early end, and the fact that Granit Xhaka is now just a game away from returning. The thing that comes into my mind, or the thing I'm thinking about, and perhaps it's a reason for my stance potentially shifting, is that I looked at last night and it was just so clear that in terms of a striker, we're still a million miles away. And now what do you do with that? Obviously there's an interest in Vlahovic. The longer this goes on and the closer we get to the back end of the window, the more you feel it might not happen. But does this, and does a potential failure to bring him in open the door for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang to return to the picture? Aubameyang being linked with a move to Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia with a loan deal and an obligations clause for them to purchase him at the end of it. Now, for Arsenal, the money that they'd get for Aubameyang in the summer feels quite insignificant. I've been told that it's between £5 and £7 million, which is not a lot of money, but it's not about the money coming in. It's what it means in terms of money going out, and getting Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang off of your wage bill for next season, because remember, he's got another year on his contract, could potentially open up some funds, or free up some funds is the term I should use, to allow us to go and get the likes of Vlahovic and meet his demands, or anybody else that we feel is right. I don't know. Sam Tonk says that Ornstein has said that Aubameyang coming back is unlikely because there's been too much water gone under the bridge, and I feel like that as well. I find it hard to believe that he'll just be welcomed back into the fray with open arms. But it's so clear that in Lacazette and Nketiah, we don't have the quality to compete at the level we want to be at. And I would say that, maybe if Lacazette, touchwood, didn't pick up any injuries and played to something close to his maximum a large percentage of the time, we'd have a chance of finishing in the top 6. But I don't think either of the current options give us what we need to finish in the top 4. And again, when I go back to what I was saying at the start of the season, and the kind of stance I've taken consistently throughout this season, I've always said that for me, top 4 is the absolute maximum. And if you achieve that, you can't really dig this team out or the manager out for anything, because I think they'd have done their job, and they'd have done their job very, very well. But, the fact that United have been really poor and have had to fire a manager mid-season and replace him with another manager who has come in, and some people say has done a good job. I don't think he's done a bad job, Ralph Rangnick, but I don't think he's done an awful lot in terms of fixing some of the issues that they had. And then you consider that Tottenham too also had to sack a manager, brought in Antonio Conte, and up until now, and I know we've still got 10 or so days remaining of the window haven't really backed him in January, you'd have said that this was a good opportunity. You know, Chelsea dropping off in form as well, and all of a sudden the 4th place is up for grabs. But you know, I would say this, you know, you can adjust expectations over the course of the season. I always say this, but you shouldn't go back and rip up the ones you had at the start of the season, because they're the ones that you made with a clear head. They're the ones that you made when you weren't being biased based on circumstances surrounding other clubs. And I would say that, you know, a top 6 finish should have been Arsenal's aim at the start of the season. Top 4 would be great. Anything below 6th place for me is unacceptable. And then there will be serious questions about the manager for me. And there'll be serious questions around whether this project will ever work, because we're quite a way into it now. And, you know, while there's been sort of hints and signs that we're moving in the right direction, it's not always been good. And there's been some mismanagement with the way we've dealt with the squad as well, with the way we've dealt with some disciplinary issues. There's been other causes for concern kind of outside of the football pitch and the parameters of the Emirates Stadium field. So, yeah, lots and lots to think about. I want to get some of your questions in, so please do pop your questions in the live chat box. Stick a Q at the beginning of them. It just makes it easier for me to pick them out. If you are listening via the audio platforms, here's a quick message with regards to our sponsors, Athletic Greens. Welcome back to part 2 of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and on this edition, we're talking all things Arsenal. We're talking the defeat to Liverpool. We're talking the midfield situation, the striker situation, the mismanagement, perhaps a need, I don't know if that is the case, to move players out before we can bring players in. We've spoken about the latest on Dusan Vlahovic as well. We've established that perhaps too much water has gone under the bridge with regards to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, which means a return for him into the side is unlikely. Don't know. But lots and lots to kind of mull over and think about in the aftermath of that defeat at Emirates Stadium on Thursday night. But we're going to take some of your questions now. Actually, do you know what? Before we take your questions, I've got to do this, because there's a lot of you know I missed my wife's birthday yesterday to go down to the Emirates Stadium. I missed my wife's birthday to go down to Emirates Stadium. I chose the semi-final over my wife. And naturally, she wasn't best pleased about it. So I have to do something to try and make it up to her. And I've decided that I'm going to give her a little shout out on this episode of the podcast. And I'm going to give her and her wonderful business partner a shout out for some of the brilliant work that they're doing. And for those of you who have been in the situation where you've upset or irritated your missus, you know that the best way to get out of it is to shower them with gifts. And with Valentine's Day just around the corner, I just want to draw your attention to some of the brilliant work that they're doing over with their company, G London, where they're making all sorts of products, skincare products, bath products, candles, all that kind of stuff. You know, it's brilliant stuff. It's really well made. It's handmade, and it's available to buy online. You just visit their website, which is g-london.com. You can also find them on Instagram as well, and that is gi.ldn. So please do check them out. Valentine's Day is just around the corner, and they've got a huge January sale on. It's their biggest sale ever. So you can save yourself quite a bit of money on some of their fantastic products. And if you're like me, you'll have learned over the years that if you shower them with gifts, it doesn't always rectify it, because they'll store it and they'll bring it up at another time. But it does go a long way in fixing things. So head over. There you go. And some of you are calling it a shameless plug to get back into the good books. It absolutely is, and I make no apologies for it. So check out G London. I'll leave the link in the description as well, and get ahead of the game. Order your missus a Valentine's Day gift, and that way you won't forget. There you go. Good stuff. Right, let's go back to the questions. Apologies for the delay, but I had to do that. I had to get it in. Right, let's see what we've got. Gooner Legend says, why don't we formally bid for Vlahovic to force a decision? It feels like we're nervous about being formally turned down. So I think that the way this works, mate, is that a lot of the time when clubs make a formal bid, they know what the outcome of that bid is going to be prior to actually going through the bother of the paperwork side of things. So what I'm trying to say is I think the discussions normally take place, and then a club knows whether or not that's, they know what the selling point is. They know what it is they need to offer. They know what it is, how much they need to pay. And a lot of the time when they submit bids that get rejected, they're submitting them not because they think it's going to get accepted or that seller is going to change their mind, but they do it to make it public, to formalize the matter, to, as you say, apply pressure. But I don't think in this instance there's a problem with Fiorentina. I don't think there's an instance, I don't think there's an issue with meeting Fiorentina's demands. I think Arsenal have been in conversations with them. That's been confirmed by the general director. I think that what it is that the ball is with is in the player and his agent's court. And I think Arsenal maybe don't want to submit a bid until they get some indication that it's something that will be entertained. I mean, why would you submit the bid and go through all the headache of submitting the bid and then having that where people go, oh, look, Arsenal submitted a bid and they got turned away? Why would you go through all that if you've had no indication that, there is even interest from the other party? And I think in football, more than any other industry, there's obviously a lot of scrutiny on all the business you do. We're talking about huge sums of money. We're talking about huge value. And what that means to me is that it's impossible to imagine that there wouldn't be discussions going on behind the scenes or kind of testing of the waters before we move along on these things. So I think that Arsenal don't have a problem with Fiorentina, and I don't think Fiorentina have a problem with Arsenal and the amount of money being talked about, which is why Arsenal, in my opinion, haven't submitted a formal offer until they hear something with regards to the player and his representatives. Don't make the bid. You didn't get rejected. I guess that's kind of it. But yeah, John Daly says, where is the best place to take the wife after the match on Sunday for a nice meal? Depends what you're after, mate. Let me know what type of cuisine it is you're after, and I'm sure I can give you a recommendation. If you're talking about right around Arsenal, though, there isn't all that much that I would recommend. You'd probably have to go away a little bit or come out a little bit from that particular area. But let me know. Maybe someone else will know better than me. Matt G says, Harry, we talk a lot about the positive impact Xhaka has on the team. Does a striker who doesn't score enough goals have that much of a positive impact? I think that he does have some positive impact. I was really critical of him last night, and this is kind of, I've always kind of known deep down that there's not quite enough from Lacazette that means we can always rely on him week in, week out to be that man who leads the line. I think what he does do is he brings out more from Saka, Smith Rowe, maybe Odegaard, Martinelli than Aubameyang does because of his style of play. It's unselfish. It's dropping into deeper positions. A lot of the time when he drops into those deeper positions, it creates the channels that Saka and Martinelli can drive into from those wider starting positions, and they benefit from that. But he doesn't score enough goals. He never has, and that's always been a bit of an issue. And I think somebody like Roberto Firmino is a really good example, right? He's got so much to offer in terms of build-up play, always has for Liverpool. But what's prevented him going to the very elite level is that he doesn't score enough goals. For a player who plays centre forward in a team that scores as many goals as Liverpool do, Roberto Firmino doesn't contribute enough. And what they've done is they've gone out and brought in Diogo Jota, who's come in, does a lot of the work that Firmino does. Not all of it, though. His build-up play isn't as good as Firmino's, but he's added goals to that position. And that's enhanced Liverpool's front line even further. And you've seen, I know they both played yesterday because of the AFCON absences, but you've seen quite often this season, Jurgen Klopp opt for Jota through the middle as opposed to Firmino. And that's because there will come a point where, you need to contribute a certain amount of goals as well to be pulling your weight in that front three. So yeah, it's one of those things where I do think he brings a lot of positives, but he, first of all, fitness wise, he's not up to doing it for 90 minutes every single game. He's out on his feet all the time. He looks really sort of tired and as if he's lacking in sharpness so quickly in games. And second of all, the lack of goals is obviously not helpful. So as going back to your point, Matt, I've gone around in circles a little bit. I do think he brings some things to the team, and I think it's unfair to dismiss those things, but he's not good enough for the long term. I think that's clear. Kev says, what about going for Osimhen instead of Vlahovic now he's back from injury? See, I'm glad this one come up next, because see, I don't think Osimhen gives you enough in the build-up. And this is where Osimhen will score you goals, but then he doesn't give you enough in the build-up. And Arsenal are looking for something in between, I think. And this is the difficulty, right? It means you can only move for a very select group of strikers who seem to tick a lot of boxes. And, you know, I'm worried about Osimhen and his injuries. And I wonder if we're going to see a bit of a trend there. Plus, if you think that Fiorentina and Vlahovic are difficult to deal with, De Laurentiis of Napoli is in a league of his own. Russ Morgan says that why do we have such an issue with discipline? Honestly, don't know. Was asked this question on the 90 min gas tank earlier on today, and I really don't know. You know, somebody asked me if I should be pointing the finger at Mikel or if I should be pointing the finger at the players. And I think it's got to be with the players, right? I mean, Mikel didn't shout across the pitch to Thomas Partey to make a needless challenge late on in a game that would see him get sent off. That's a decision that the player makes. You know, he didn't call for Granit Xhaka to Cobra Kai kick the Liverpool attacker in the first leg. A lot of these decisions rest on the player's shoulders. I think what we're seeing is in trying to extract more aggression from this Arsenal side, which we all agree was necessary, we've seen a lot of those players then struggle to contain that and struggle to cope with understanding when and where are the places to be exerting that aggression and when there are times where you need to hold back a little bit. I mean, Lacazette's a prime example, right? Yesterday, gets a yellow card, you know, always in people's faces, always hustling and bustling in and around the midfield and beyond. And he got a yellow card yesterday and then continued in that fashion. And as I was saying to some of the guys earlier, if you tell Lacazette not to play with that aggression, not to press, not to haggle the way he did, then you might as well not have him in the team. So there's a fine line between getting the aggression levels that you need out of these players, but then them having that maturity to be able to contain it at the right moments. And I just think we've been really, really bad at that. And it seems to be the same people over and over again in a lot of instances. I'm not going to go too big on Thomas Partey because he doesn't do it regularly, but, you know, Granit Xhaka is someone that clearly struggles with that. I think Lacazette struggles with it quite a bit. He's picked up an awful lot of bookings for a centre forward, you know, by everybody else's standards. But again, you know, it's very difficult to find that balance between, as I say, getting them to play in a certain way and press aggressively and really getting in people's faces and preventing teams finding their rhythm against us. But then you also don't want to clip their wings and say, well, now you can't do this because we're worried about disciplinary issues. But it doesn't help when you go down to 10 men against anybody. But it certainly doesn't help that these issues then go on to impact us in upcoming games. It's not like Partey got sent off last night. He left us for 10 men for however long it was at the end of that particular match. It's now an issue that we carry with us into the next game. In Granit Xhaka's case, is an issue that we had to carry through a couple of games. So this is the big problem, right? These issues don't just impact us within a 90-minute period. They impact us for a period of time. Let's take a few more of your questions. Harry's in the doghouse. You're a brave man, Harry. That's my man, Harry. I feel you. Crusader says, Mrs. H, please forgive Harry. Good stuff. What else have we got? Sam Tonk says, is Bruno Guimaraes a good option? I don't know enough about him or players like Renato Sanchez and Arthur. Are players like Renato Sanchez or Arthur better? Look, from what I'm told, Bruno Guimaraes is a really good option. And I've spoken a lot with Tom Canton on the Gooner Talk TV who's done a lot more research and due diligence around Bruno Guimaraes than I have. I'm not a massive viewer of French football, I've got to be honest. So my knowledge on Guimaraes is limited, and it's solely based on what I've seen in European competition at times. But from what I'm told, he seems a very realistic option and somebody that could add something to this team. But it's, again, I go back to that point. How much of Arsenal's lack of transfer activity so far is down to a lack of trying or a lack of wanting, and how much of it is down to the fact that we have to move players on first and in order to balance that wage bill? And I would argue that it's probably the latter. I don't for a second believe that Mikel Arteta looks at that squad and thinks, no, we're good, we don't need anything. He might be very coy in his press conferences and he might keep his cards close to his chest, but I fully believe that Mikel Arteta is well aware of the work that he's doing. And as I've said before, I think a lot of the business that would have originally been planned for the summer is in a place now where it's in the spotlight again because of the deficiencies and the absences that we've had to deal with. And I think in a lot of ways, we were almost accelerating the activity that we wanted to do in the summer and trying to make it happen in January, which isn't going to be easy. What else have we got? John Daly says, Greek or Turkish, anywhere in London. Is it open on a Sunday? I think it is, but not till 5. Try a place called Vrisagi in Wood Green. Google it, you'll find it. Nice food. You could also go to Desiree and Cockfosters, nice Greek food as well. Don't really know too much about other places. Not an expert on all cuisines, despite being as cultured as I am. No, I'm just kidding. Gentile recommends Piebury Corner. Alex says the Chinese fish and chips down the road. Oh, I'm not sure about that. I've eaten there once and I wasn't a fan. I haven't returned since to give it a fair judgment, but yeah. What else have we got? Deepak Patel says, was last night inevitable with our kids with KSC skimping? Will we ever become top 4 consistently? Will all managers experience that fate with kids? Look, the fact that they are kids is obviously a big thing, right? And it shouldn't be overlooked. We've got to be realistic about the route and approach that Arsenal have decided to take, which is a long-term approach. It's a rebuild. It's one based around the development of a group of young players who the club are hoping will develop at the same time and at the same rate. And that will culminate in Arsenal being a competitive side without having to spend, because we can't and we won't, or KSC can, but they won't, spend the kind of vast amounts of money that Man City and Chelsea spend. So that's the approach. That's the route they've decided to go down. And as I keep saying, if you're on board with that approach, and a lot of people are, and I think when you consider that we're never going to go and break the bank, then that's the way to do it. You got to accept that there'll be nights like last night where it was just simply men against boys. Somebody pointed it out to me when we were watching the game live. Every time you felt like Arsenal were gaining a bit of momentum in the game and the crowd was getting up and getting behind the team, and you felt as though Arsenal were moving forward and potentially en route to getting back into the game, Liverpool would just have this really dull spell of possession. They'd get the ball down, they'd control the game, they'd take the sting out of the crowd, and then they'd proceed to go about their business. And I think that's the difference between experience. Sometimes you just need to silence the crowd. You don't, every time you win the ball, it's not about always, particularly when you're 1-0 up, going gung-ho and trying to find that goal that ultimately ends the contest. Sometimes it's about taking the sting out of your opponents. And I think through experience, you start to learn that. And I think Mikel Arteta as a manager through experience will hopefully start to learn that as well. Big thank you to Sedi, who's become a YouTube member. Thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate your support. Don't forget, if you want to become a member of the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description, and members will be given the opportunity to join me on our weekly members podcast, the information of which will come over the weekend. We'll let you know when we're doing the next one, and I'll get 3 of you on with me, and we'll rotate that round each week. Bedros says, why do our fans go overboard with criticism or praise? Completely agree. He says people fall people have called Tomiyasu a Japanese Bellerin. Benjamin White was not the worst defensive player. He says Tierney was poor, and so was Gabriel. I do think that we go too far one way or the other. Look, I said it on the post-match show last night. Tomiyasu was awful. That was the worst performance I've seen from Tomiyasu. But that doesn't undo all the good things he's done, and it doesn't change the fact that overall he's been a very, very positive signing. And I think people struggle to differentiate between criticism based on one game, one event, one fixture, and criticism in general. And for me, my criticism of Takahiro Tomiyasu yesterday was based on what I saw yesterday, and nothing more than that. He hadn't trained. We know that now. He was willing to play, showed great dedication to the cause despite not training, because he knew that Cedric and Chambers were out. So fair play to him. Gave his best, but unfortunately it just wasn't good enough. Let's see what else we've got. Let's see what we've got. Kev says, Harry, do you think these flat, inconsistent performances some weeks will be eradicated as time goes by, given it's quite a new team and young? We seem to be at it or flat, little in between. Yeah, I think consistency is something that comes from experience, because you learn how to deal with certain situations and adapt to certain situations, and having that greater experience then helps you get over the line in certain games. Yeah, I think consistency is always the biggest question mark around young players. You can see lots of talented young players burst onto the scene, look good with the ball at their feet, etc., etc. But then you get to 2021, and now the challenge is, well, you've been a prospect and people have liked you and ranted and raved about you and seen certain highlights and feel that you're in the right direction. But now the big challenge, and what makes a youngster into a man, in my opinion, is being able to deliver week in, week out. And so I do think that's important. Let's see. I'm going to take a couple more questions from the chat before I go. Harry Basson says, hi, Harry, do you think the refs are very quick to brandish yellows to Arsenal while other teams get the rub of the green? 14 red cards for a team who gets told we're soft is a good point. It is a really good point. But look, I think overall, we've been very unfortunate in some of the disciplinary issues we've faced. That a lot of it is our fault and is of our own making, and I think you have to take responsibility for that. But I think there have been games where I felt like, especially Man City at home not too long ago, where it felt that that we were unfairly treated. Man City, it felt like Arsenal players made a challenge straight into the book. Man City players, Rodri in particular, could walk around the pitch, kick the shit out of people, and there was never any consequence to that. And that was obviously difficult to stomach, difficult to take. But I think, like last night, I think we could have really no complaints about the decision to send Thomas Partey off. So yeah. Arsenal legend says, Harry, this could be the downfall of Arsenal getting top four. Look, I'm not going to go as far as saying that the top four is off the table because we lost in a Carabao Cup semi-final against a team that everybody and their dog knows is better than us. I think that's overreactionary. But I would say that the way we're feeling right now is a consequence not just of last night's result and performance, but is a consequence of the fact that a lot of us have kind of seen this before. We've seen us get to a point in the season, feel like we're in contention, not make right and smart decisions in key moments, and end up paying for it later on. And I think a lot of people are feeling down and worried because of that distinct possibility kind of rearing its ugly head again. So, yeah, it feels like it could be a pivotal point. Like if Arsenal can go out and do some business between now and the window closing that gives the whole place and the squad a boost and a lift, then all of a sudden everybody feels more optimistic again. And I do think that mood transmits across to the team as well. So, look, people are a bit down at the moment. People are a bit frustrated. People are, as I say, frustrated because of both the performance, the result, and everything that's going on at the club right now. But I think it's in Arsenal's hands to lift that mood again, and we got to do it quickly. I always say this, said it yesterday, repeating it again. Arsenal Football Club don't need to be the best team in England. They just need to be better than 16 of the teams in the Premier League to get into the top four. And we have the quality in a lot of areas to be better than a lot of those teams. But, you know, it means nothing if you don't deliver on it. And we're in a really pivotal moment right now. And, you know, there will be setbacks. But as I keep saying, everybody's going to drop points in this league. Everybody does. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But what you need to do is make sure, and I always say this, and I'll say it again, you need to make sure that the dips don't turn into rots, because a rot kills you. And we had a rot right at the beginning of last season, if you remember, which meant that even though we outperformed 18, 17 of the rest of the Premier League clubs in the second half of the season, the damage was already done and we couldn't pull it back. So what we've done better this season, and the reason we're still in contention at this stage, is because we've had setbacks, and sometimes they've lasted a week, sometimes they've lasted 2-3 weeks, but we've been able to then get back on track and go on runs. And when you look at Arsenal's upcoming fixtures, I'm not saying that they're easy. There is no such thing as an easy game in the Premier League. But you got Burnley at home, which you expect to win. Wolves away is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. But if you've got top 4 aspirations, you have to go and get a result there. Brentford at home, you'd say if you want to finish in the top 4, has to be a banker. Watford has to be a banker. Leicester at home, you'd fancy us given their form this season. Villa away will be tough. Then Palace, Brighton. But these are sides that Arsenal, if you want to finish in those positions, these are fixtures you simply need to win. And just to reiterate that point, you know, we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be better than those teams we're competing with. And given what we discussed earlier on and the fact that a lot of those teams are nowhere near their best, you have to feel like we've got a chance. But, you know, there's a long way to go. There'll be a lot of twists. There'll be a lot of turns. I just feel like Arsenal could really boost everybody and the fan base if they went out and got some business done that would enhance the squad and hopefully take us in the right direction. Right, going to wrap up the podcast there. What is going on? There's over 200 of you watching us live on YouTube right now. We've only got 67 likes on the board. Come on, guys. Let's get that up to 100 likes by the time the outro plays. That should be easily achievable. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Please do subscribe if you're listening via the podcast platforms. Leave us a review as well, particularly if you're on Apple Podcasts. Check out Athletic Greens. The link is in the description. And go over and order something from my wife's website. When I tell her that I missed her birthday because I had to be there for the Chronicles of a Gooner, if she got a load of orders coming in, it would certainly make her feel better. And there's a big sale on, so you can get your wife a nice Valentine's present, nice and early, not cutting it too fine. Got plenty of time to receive it. And yeah, check it out. Right, I'll be back very, very soon with more. Until next time, goodbye.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.